like that intro. My team's done
such
a great job. All right. Well, hello and welcome. We are back. It's been since November since we've had a Live with Top Voices series, and we are starting it today talking about visibility isn't vanity. I am Nikki Estes with Market Me More. We help founders turn their expertise into influence, building their visibility, their credibility, and opportunity for storytelling, strategic media, and community building so that they are known, they are trusted, and they are invited into rooms that matter. Today, our conversation is going to be wrapped around Jonathon, and I'm super excited that he's here with me. The information that we're going to share with you dates back to our, what was that, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, where we got to present at the Major League Baseball Players Association with the Players Trust. And we got to talk to youth about how they can build a business, what entrepreneur life looks like. John, what else did we do while we were there? That was 2 full days.
Yeah, well, we got to coach some students, especially for a pitch contest they got to do for how to improve the sport. It's not easy to actually contribute something to an already pretty sophisticated sport. Your team, however, actually won the event. And my team got to demonstrate very early on how you work together when you don't all agree on what the correct outcome should be. So I think my team won too, because we went from a state of disagreement to a state of agreement, and we shipped a pretty good product, I thought, despite the fact that we didn't win.
I believe your product was great too. You had the glasses, and they had the bedazzle on them.
Yeah. We were excited about the many features we were building into our glasses. However, what we didn't do is modify the actual game equipment itself. So we weren't thinking that far down the line. We were thinking about what we thought could exist pretty quickly.
Sure. Well, in those conversations teaching the kids, like, we also prepared them that some ideas are fantastic and some don't win, but I believe part of our win was because we understood visibility. When all of the judges went to the back, to give those of you in the audience some idea, the judges spent time with each kid's project by reading over a poster board, and then they had to make a prototype of what it could look like. And the kids were at lunch during that time. Well, realizing this, we recorded my kids telling what their presentation is. We downloaded it onto a QR code, printed the QR code, and put that beside the project and said, "Watch me first." And so there was visibility in what it is they actually wanted to get across, right? Our messaging was thoroughly communicated. So I believe that once you have a good idea, it's your responsibility to make sure that your audience understands what it is, what it can do, why it's important. And that was our, I don't believe that was vanity of her standing there and teaching that. I mean, right?
I think you did exactly what you were invited to do. You were invited to coach, and you won. And that's the way to do it.
Super, super fun. Okay, well, let's talk about you, because we weren't supposed to talk about my win, though it was fantastic and I really enjoyed the time together. Let's talk about your win. So let's talk about your community systems, your role as a founder, and let's talk about your playbook of how you go to business as a founder.
Sure. Well, going back to the challenge that my team had, this is something I see very regular with clients and opportunities in construction, or what we call AEC, architectural engineering and construction, and software development broadly. We have amazing services and technologies available at our fingertips, and I argue the cost of engineering is dropping daily, right? But the value of security, the value of good engineering and first principles has never been more valuable. So understanding the correct outcome you're looking for, right, is the goal. And what I had hoped to bring to my student team was that ultimately, in order to submit something, we had to agree on what we submitted. And more importantly, we all needed to feel like we contributed something meaningful to that solution. And so this is a process I deal with on a regular basis for customers and projects, and it's kind of stakeholder project alignment, user alignment. So I would say that's not a skill everyone is born with, but it's a skill everyone can have when you recognize what the outcome you're looking for. And so my recommendation to anyone, especially with their business AI strategy, is to really think about what the outcome you're looking for is. Try to take a holistic approach to your design or how your product or service works. And I can tell you, in the construction business, there have been many ideas tried over a long time of how you can automate without a person in the middle. And every time it doesn't work, right? There has to be a person in the middle. And despite the technology and the software and the hardware getting better and faster, there still has to be a person in the middle when there's a safety measure involved. And so safety and security is the foundation you want to build on if you want something that will be safe and last.
Mhm. So when you're thinking of safety, what is that? There's different, like, we safety, the umpire's got like the face guard, or the kids are wearing the protectors for their arms to protect them against muscle strain. But in technology, what kind of safeguards, the guardrails? Explain what that is a little bit better.
Sure. Well, let's use a team as an analogy, right? We have players on a team, we have coaching staff, we have performances, and we have the facilities itself, right? There are different security or risk mitigation tolerances for each. Not everyone agrees on the same approach to safety and security, right? So there needs to be a consensus, and probably on multiple layers, from a player level, from a coaching staff, from an ownership level, and from a facilities level. So any business would apply the same way. It doesn't matter what your company does. You have requirements for your building, requirements for your staff, requirements for your operations team, and requirements for your owners. How does the software align as a pattern for all of those nodes, you can call it, right? So if each one of those layers has a responsibility to a project, usually there's a framework involved. And in the case of construction, we've had building information management systems and international standards for building compliance for a long time. It doesn't mean people use them. It doesn't mean people follow them. It doesn't mean contractors do a good job. So at the end of the day, just because a framework exists doesn't mean it's being used or people even understand how it works, how it's available. There's a lot of really good open source data about how to do a construction project and manage all of your files and data. But even being in a public capacity doesn't mean you as a homeowner or you as a business facility owner have access to that data. So a big part of what I do is education and training and communication, right? So depending on what the problem or challenges you're trying to overcome is, usually there's a first step. There are early movers who have published and put out their information of a framework that could be adopted on an open source level. In some cases, there are proprietary information or additional layers of security or risk mitigation that has to be built on top of that. And that's going to be information property. Someone's going to have put some time and resources and development into the sauce, right? And you want to pay for the restaurant to experience that sauce. But at the end of the day, knowing that there are fantastic tools you can get out there, and we said earlier, get a man on base, right? Just ground hit. You can use the available tools that are out there, free of cost, no code, low code. The information's out there. Get a man on base. And then after you play the game a couple of rounds, maybe start swing for the fences yourself.
Right. You really like the whole baseball analogy.
They're so good.
Well, we went further and used that in our deck with the kids. We talked about the athlete versus the founder. I've got a slide here. So anyone that's wanting to go from being a corporate professional or an athlete to becoming a founder, there's also a path and some analogies that we use with that. Something in my throat. So we talked about with the athlete, you're practicing. So this is as the athlete goes to practice every day. This is like the founder iterating what they're doing it until it works. And you have a framework on that. What's build, share, no,
Measure.
build, measure, learn, share. Right?
You got it. That's it. And I didn't come up with that framework. I was blessed to have the opportunity to work with some very talented architects and engineers out of Europe who have been very deep in architectural engineering, science, and development for a long time. So as much as I would like to take credit for that framework, I got a really good decentralized, free, low cost education that I used myself. And that's why I try my best to give back to the community for the same free education I got myself.
Sure. Which goes into the next part of the journey of the founder is having the mentors. Do you want to give any shout out to any mentors in particular? We can tag them.
Yeah, absolutely. Benoit Jose, my CTO for Micropay Technologies, he's been a strong voice in the space for a long time. Was a accomplished Web 2 cloud architect engineer before what we call Web 3 or crypto or the blockchain space. Enterprise software services. Most of my mentors come from enterprise software services. Jay Smith as well, chairman of the Accumulate Foundation. We like to joke that there's not a COBOL-based financial institution that does not have some piece of code with his fingerprints on it. But also Ralph Montague of BIM Heroes DAO. And Larry Bridgesmith as well. Ralph, I've been working with for probably close to 5 years now, and has given me a good Irish education and a European perspective of how building is different outside of the U.S. than it is inside of the U.S. And then Larry Bridgesmith from Vanderbilt University is a professor of law. And so they're big, large advocates for the use of blockchain and decentralized people management for construction and how the technology in the space is moving forward and the potential implications of quantum. Never in my life have I ever thought or could have planned that as a construction expert, I would have to put consideration in the legal consequences of quantum technology. But this is the day we live in.
You can explain that to me some other time. I love having conversations with you, and like it helps me to learn, to grow.
Exponential growth is the only thing I can say. We unprecedented times we live in cause us to be exposed to tools that grow at an alarming rate. And so again, the cost of engineering is dropping on a daily basis, but the value of specification of software is becoming more and more value. And most of my mentors have brought a specification training for me to follow, and all of them have produced open source work themselves. The foundation is open source. Benoit Jose has an open source portfolio. Some of the best builders and founders, mature, experienced, wise developers have all put in their time under an open source model.
You'll have to tell the difference. For those in our audience, they're probably a lot of tech people. So you've started your company in open source, but then you have a private model you were telling me about. Like, what was the reason for moving?
Yeah, well, actually, I started in closed source. I had originally intended to explore autonomous construction management, right? Just broadly, what does it take for a building to build or manage itself in a full life cycle capacity? And there's still humans in the loop, but the human you put in the loop definitely increase the quality of execution, right? So I started improving the quality of the people who were contributing to my platform and my projects. Ultimately, I was given the opportunity to connect with Invenium Capital Group, who's one of the largest commercial real estate tokenization platforms in the world. They raised over $150 million last year from G42. And there are the Accumulate Foundation. There are many different entities that are building cutting edge tools. But in my naivety as a founder, I had assumed enterprise tools would be as useful to a small to medium business as it would be an enterprise. And unfortunately, not having a traditional path from technology or computer science, that was news to me. But what I'm recognizing is because the cost of engineering is going down, having an education in enterprise security and risk management has put me in a unique position to educate the market broadly, or consumers, for what are the big guys doing, right? Why did they build it that particular way? Why have implementation plans or research plans manifested the way they have? And that's because at scale, an enterprise need is very different than a small to medium business. But I think there's plenty to distill, right? I think there's plenty to distill down to. And so in a world where consumers are all designing and responsible for their own spec, right, of their software, understanding what a specification framework is and how it aligns with the organizational flow of their employees in their business and their revenue models is your AI strategy. That's it. It's really that simple. A lot of media and a lot of publishing makes it sound like a lot more complicated than it really is. If you've exposed yourself or used any of the tools, then you already have an AI plan. You may not have formally adopted one, but when your AI plan becomes a specification, right, well, now you're on track for an enterprise framework versus just a consumer level.
And that would go at some point, the founder needs to recognize when that transfer.
What?
My
there?
screen. Yeah. Are you here? I'm here.
I'm in.
Did you hear an echo? I opened up. I was looking at the LinkedIn user that we have. Sorry about that. So I wanted to give a shout out to the LinkedIn user, but I didn't know who they were. They're showing up on my screen as comments. So my question here was, when does a founder know that they're supposed to transfer over to using the small, medium tools to become an enterprise user? What are the tell signs?
Sure. Everyone should have a risk management strategy. And if you're building tools for one person, the risk is to yourself, right? Maybe the potential your other business partners or your clients are connecting to. But if you're intending to use client data, then you are technically using an enterprise framework, and you would benefit from a specification of enterprise grade security and risk management. But if you're just building apps for yourself, what they call vibe coding, there's nothing wrong with vibe coding. I would equate it to playing a musical instrument. Don't let anyone tell you how to play a musical instrument. Now, that being said, my grandmother spent her entire life and career teaching concert level piano from Juilliard. So not everyone plays instruments the same way, but I would always encourage anyone to pick an instrument and play if that's the creative expression that brings meaning to their life. Mm-hmm. As a founder, once you accept that what you want to build or what you want to see exist in what you're building involves other people, right, their data and potentially interactions with their system, that's when the education really should start. That's when you should understand how you're transferring risk, right? Because what most people don't realize is when you're building software or products now and you're interacting with another system, you could be transferring risk to that system. So when I create a solution that lets every one of the team members of a construction project all collaborate their data in one place, I'm creating a potential risk for each one of those members, right? So understanding how we are potentially sharing or exposing our partners or our clients to risk is very important for our specification.
Hmm. So in marketing, we talked about our digital bench, and we're building content, right? So we have the written content, so you can use the Claudes or the ChatGPTs and an LLM of sorts. And then for like visual stuff, we're looking at the Soras or the Groks. So what kind of tools do you find in your business that you're using? Like what helps you to be able to build out this platform, this framework?
Sure. Well, again, everyone plays their instrument differently. And in my case, I'm responsible for client and partner data. So I have a responsibility to privacy. And more importantly, I'm an advisor to my clients. So I'm held to a higher standard of procedures than most would be because of the capacity I am in. I would say broadly, the models themselves have been the frontier models. Your OpenAI, your Claude, your Gemini. The frontier models are so broadly ubiquitous as an intelligence service at this point. I would not encourage any business not to have exposure to one or more models. And in my project's case, we have a multi-model framework, something like call a harness. Right? A harness is how each model are working together in a system in a coordinated manner. When you're dealing with privacy and security, you're connecting each model to that risk framework. So your harness works both ways. It works for the models themselves as workhorses, but it also works for the driver and the stagecoach, if we want to use that. Right. That's how we're moving. That's how we're moving forward. Is we're moving forward in a multi-model orchestration. But that's not how every consumer should use models. That may be more tool than the job demands. When again, sometimes in a consumer standpoint, the goal is just to get a man on base. And so if the goal is just to get a man on base, pick one tool. It doesn't matter which one. Pick one tool and start asking questions and start building a specification or a framework or a product vision for yourself. And how does it align with your business needs?
So we have earlier you had said that you disagree that visibility is not vanity. So when you're building in Claude, for instance, and you're working with data on an enterprise level, is there anything like when someone is building their marketing? So the solopreneur, let's say the ultimate solopreneur, they're building an app that works with patient data, but then they're also building their content for their marketing. Is there any kind of problem with that could leak security issues?
Sure. Well, as soon as you say medical, now you're automatically in HIPAA, right? And HIPAA has its own requirements, just as fintech or any other data-rich environment with regulatory requirements. So yeah, absolutely. The moment you say medical industry, you've got a whole nother compliance layer on top of that. Same with financial services. In a world where you're just managing a content generation engine and distribution, maybe a CRM, right? No, you don't have the same HIPAA requirements. Claude is interesting. I am frequently asked about my opinion between the models and how each of them relate to each other as a tool. Accepting that all of the frontiers and many other additional models as well is all part of the harness, right? Each model has its own strengths or weaknesses. And one of the reasons why Claude is in the stack and why I'm a big advocate for Anthropic was they really demonstrated a governance fulfillment as an API service. So when you're dealing with information property, or you're dealing with complex reporting requirements. In the past, there has been a potential concern about visibility or IP leak with models. I would say by choosing a frontier model, especially in an API format, you're really protecting your information property with a enterprise service, or a business class service from each of them. But Claude uniquely was deployed with a governance system that encouraged a lot of founders like myself to at least minimally include them in a model based on capability as a governance tool, because of what's called constitution. So Claude has a constitution capability in the native protocol, which allows delineation or segregation between customer projects or workstations. Now, again, that's probably way more sophisticated than most of your average consumers or even small to medium business. But it goes to the nuance. I'm going to use the stagecoach analogy again, right? Clydesdales versus any other horse, right? Each model in the harness has a unique value driver, and I think the winners, the founders who are winners, are going to be the ones who have indexed each of those models, understand those capabilities and value drivers uniquely, and have built that into the harness. And if that feels super overwhelming and complicated, it's what's being done at the bleeding edge of technology. And in most cases, I would recommend, for someone just getting started in the space, work on what I call a handoff. So it doesn't matter which model you choose. If you're going to hand off a task between one model to another, what does the handoff process look like? Because it'll be the foundation for how your harness is built.
All right. So now give me some handoff, because we've got founders that are here that are figuring out, like, what is that? How do I go from Claude to Notebook LM to Sora? And what am I using Grok for? And why am I using Gemini? Like, what does a handoff look like?
Sure. Well, I don't want to prescribe anything to anyone. I would first encourage people to try themselves. And the beauty of intelligence tools is you can ask. The information is out there, right? So it really comes down to your specific implication or implementation. And what I'd say is alignment, right? If you have multiple levels in a business, right, you have your employees, your management team, your owner, and the physical structure itself, right? Different models could have different tasks or workflows in each one of those layers, right? Ultimately, what the owner, the founder, wants to do is build alignment between each of the layers. Priority number one should be an alignment between each of the layers. And then that would be your specification for what one or more than one model would do. And once you know the limitations on each of the levels, or the handoff between levels, or the handoff between agents, what the problem is that you're trying to solve for your business, we can use your execution as an example. Right? Most people use Gemini Notebook LLM. It's a fantastic tool for knowledge management and demonstration, product demonstrations, or presentation broadly. But that may not be how you want to distill the information into report form. You may want to play around with the content before you prompt your actual asset, the notebook or the graphic or the article, right? You may want to refine prior to your prompt. And so that's where some people use one tool in one part of the process and another tool in another part of the process. And there may not be a direct integration between those two tools. There probably is. You may not be using it, right? But you are the glue, right? In the founder's case, you're the glue. So knowing that there should be a handoff is step one. Knowing what handoffs are available, tried and true, already demonstrated in open source capacities to do so. And then I would say the next territory for founders is, what do you add uniquely, right? So what have you done with the existing tools and frameworks out there, and how have you built additionally, have you contributed on top of that layer?
That's knowing each one really well. So like using Notebook LM, because you're only using that data to be able to work with and be able to make presentations, mind maps. But that's not one that you would make your visuals, like your logo, or you wouldn't go and make, I don't know, like that would be something else.
You could, most of the frontier models have multiple modes, right? The question becomes, what's your taste, right? What model have you found personal success with, the output being what you were looking for? And not everyone gets the output they're looking for with one model. That's why I encourage people to try multiple models. But at the end of the day, how you are using each model in the capacity of the workflow, right? And whether there are handoffs between one or more systems at higher levels, yes, you can automate a lot of things, but I highly discourage the use of automation until you understand the specification. Okay, and the specification is, why am I using this tool? What part of the workflow is used with this tool, right? What other tools are used within the workflow? So it's kind of more of a modular or systems thinking approach. But this is why I go back to the build, measure, learn, share framework. When you're feeling overwhelmed, there are too many choices, too much consideration, go back to what you're trying to accomplish. What are we building? How do we measure a success of what you're building? What did we learn from our deployment, right? Did we get a man on base? How easy was it, right? And then ultimately, how do you share? And in my case, because I've had so much good quality training and mentorship shared with me in an open source capacity, I feel a responsibility, right, to have visibility and share all of that information with others, or as much as I can.
Well, and that's a part of the responsibility that you've also taken on, because you have all this experience, you have those mentors in your life, and you're carrying this responsibility to share it with others. Like I really value that. Every time we talk, you're like, okay, how can I break this down also to where you get it, to where it's at where you can actually digest it. And then talking with someone else, you have a different way that you're going to speak about it. I appreciate taking that on yourself to do.
Well, you were an early advocate of my published work. We've been talking for a couple of years now, and what you very quickly diagnosed in me was not everyone's capacity to understand or even care about what I was saying. And it took you and I a while to find the right context that we could share together. But ultimately, the fact that we can share together now is because all of the work we did up to this point. So I'm gonna recommend to anyone and everyone that the tools and the visibility are out there, especially if you're willing to put yourself out there. It took me some time. It took me months to recognize how visibility is a responsibility, not just something that I could do as a founder and as a leader of my company, but more importantly, as an educator. I never really saw myself as an educator. I don't want to teach others. I really just want to make sure I do a good job. But you really showed me that if you are doing a good job, then you have a responsibility to teach others.
I'm glad that you got that. Because when you have a solution that solves a real problem, it creates intentional impact positively in the community and an audience that you're serving. I truly believe like it's your responsibility to share that, to give that information, because as soon as you started we've had a saying way back when, like, as soon as you have this idea and you know it's going to be helpful, you're on a clock to be able to share with other people, because eventually someone else is going to come up with something else. And most people, I've shared the story about how we came up with an idea where you could go and scan a QR code in front of someone's house on their real estate sign and be able to see that it had 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a living room, and there was a pool in the back. And we weren't fast enough to talk about this solution, and Zillow ended up coming up with one. So that's another thing that you miss out on, is if you're not properly educating people on the solutions and the ideas, the visions that you have. Not only could you miss out on that opportunity to collaborate with them to build something, but you may miss out completely, where it's not even your idea anymore, it's somebody else's, and then you become a sideline cheerleader.
Well, the technology is growing rapidly, right? The capability of software and technology as an intelligence service is exponential at this point. And having attempted to share that with a rural agrarian family that I come from, where there is zero or little to no appetite for really an understanding of the implications of that, not everyone has the same appetite. So to prescribe an appetite to people who don't have one is not going to help them learn anything. And so what I try to do is recognize what someone's appetite is first before I attempt to educate them, and never prescribe anything. I'm not a doctor.
Sure. Well, we have that. There's the 3-step framework we talked about with the kids, and the sponsors that were there at the MLB event. And there was the 3 C's. You had, like, the pitch slap isn't going to work. Like, your family knows, they understand, like, oh, he's trying to sell us something. You have to break it down into their language so that they could be able to digest it. Well, we talked about the curiosity. They have to have some kind of interest in it. Otherwise, you're wasting your breath, right? So if you're talking to your family about technology and they don't care about technology, then you have to talk about something else. We're not even talking about politics or religion. Like, we'll just stay away from those completely. but if you were talking about real estate, right, and the whole construction, maybe they have some interest in that. You could talk about it and then lead in to the other for just the education purposes. But for the sales purpose, like, you're out. You're not going to be able to teach them anything. Yeah.
Well, I think I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think some people are okay with not living their life in the exponential growth of technology. Mm-hmm. Some people have unsubscribed, and that's okay. That's great in many capacities. That's really, really good. So to assume that my way of thinking is right versus theirs, I think is incorrect, right? So what I try to do is not assume everyone is excited about technology as I am. Not everyone spends as much investment and time and energy as I do, staying up to date as much as possible, but to try to share a message that's relatable. What is a digital tractor? What is a digital sharecropper? Right? What does getting a man on base for your AI plan mean? And what does a home run look like? This is something that I think helps broaden the appeal without getting way down into the technical.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about a time. We're gonna pivot here where you've talked about the positive. You've talked about the direction of how to get there. You've talked about how to be able to evaluate the different systems based on what it is that you need to get out of it and the outcomes you're seeking. Tell me about a time that it didn't work, where you're playing with the technology, and I say playing, you're building something out and it didn't work, and then you had to pivot, and what did that look like?
Sure. It's expensive playing. That's all I'm going to say. It's super expensive to play. But as I mentioned earlier, assuming the market would quickly adopt an enterprise level specification or framework was incorrect. And so when my first business, a research lab, thankfully, was the strategy was to align small to medium real estate portfolios, right, with a solution custom built for Cushman Wakefield, the largest portfolio on the planet, right? They are apples and oranges. And to assume that the two of those will go nicely in the same basket right away it cost me quite a lot, because it cost me time in assuming that. However, in a pivot into more broad general financial services, what I've learned is most small to medium businesses have a technology need, they have a financial need, they have an operational need, right? So broadening out my scope, not to how does a small commercial real estate portfolio do the same thing the big guys do. How does a small to medium business compare to an enterprise framework for scalability? Meaning, how do you not over spec? That is, in my opinion, the hardest problem, the hardest challenge founders will make when they choose a specification or a framework, is how do you not overbuild? How do we not put too much foundation or too much concrete or too much material? And so the analogy in software and the physical building itself is apropos. And so it's very easy to overbuild, to specify all these products, to get all of these additional layers and sophistications, when that could actually be preventing you from getting to market faster, getting customers using products faster. And so in my case, it was a learning lesson in over specification. I'm glad at this point, again, as the cost of engineering is hitting the floor, I'm glad to have all the training I have, because it puts me in a position to be able to advise others safely in a risk mitigated format.
So what does that look like 10 years from now for you? Will you continue being in the trenches of coding, or will you potentially be taking more opportunities to teach corporately? What does that look like for you for the next 10 years?
Well, all of my mentors are still in the trenches. So
Okay.
most of them not there by choice. And so I would assume it's just a passion, right? It's just once you recognize that you want to have a know your code relationship with your product, that puts you on a kind of a different level or playing field versus your peers. Some people will never have an interest in the code. Some people will never have interest in the terminal, right? Some people will never have interest in coding tools or learning how to develop a product, but they're still vibe coding, right? They're still using a piece of software to get to a product solution in one way or another. So it's not clear. It's not a black and white. It's definitely a journey, right? And even as someone who tried to have the highest level of specification possible right out of the jump, it doesn't mean the future capacity of that high level capacity is bad. It just means it wasn't necessary. The industry wasn't ready, the customers weren't ready, the product, the infrastructure, right? So you can see something and how it will grow in value over time, right? But be early. And so I think as intelligence technology improves, those who have the capacity or the interest to learn will up level. They'll up level faster than they've ever up leveled in their entire professional career and their entire history.
Matrix, right?
Exactly. But you're going to get out of it what you want. So if what you're asking for when you jack in is kung fu, you're going to get kung fu.
I would love to know kung fu. Okay. So then, we're with this founder series, the kinds of topics that I wanted to learn about is the way that different businesses empower communities. So you're not only going to be a part of impacting economically and socially, and potentially even in healthcare with the mental capabilities, like you have a full opportunity to give deeper hooks for people to understand AI, understand what's happening because of the way that you're approaching it in the trenches. So what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? You've got all these touch points of every kind of way that you could impact what do you want to leave behind?
The legacy will
Mm-hmm.
be the difference between AI and blockchain. And when I set out as a construction and real estate portfolio project manager, I had no intention of either AI or blockchain. My goal was AI. I found blockchain and then I built AI. And the reason why I say I found blockchain and built AI is in a world of complex integrations, meaning not just how does my data interact with my project team, but how does all of my project team interact with all of the other project teams' data in my local community, right? Big scale networking, future of work type level. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There'll be those who have security specifications built on blockchains and those who do not. And what they'll find is their information property will be leaked to the models unless they're using the blockchain. And so when most people ask me questions about software, they're asking about a use case or a fulfillment. They're not asking architectural questions like why would you use a blockchain, or how does AI harness use a blockchain. But when you're dealing with security and risk mitigation and what we call in the business zero knowledge proofing, meaning I have proof of a piece of documentation that I know exists, but you've never seen it, and you've been able to fulfill your requirement needs of it but not having seen it. I'm going to give you a second for that. Let's talk about a financial document, right? You could need a financial document to me, and I want your system to process my financial document, but I don't want to show it to you directly. I want to give you derivative permission to it. Blockchain allows for that. These are high level architectural considerations, but if you're a founder, you may find yourself in a position needing those level of architectural decisions and considerations for security. And so broadly where I have landed starting from construction is in privacy and cybersecurity. At the end of the day, we all end up in privacy and security, because if you're not defending your information property and you're not securing your information property, then you are leaking your information property.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter what model you use or what your business does. At the end of the day, it's just a general truth. And the general truth is if you expose your data to models, right, it's leaked.
Mm-hmm.
So how you choose to build your product and expose your information property to these models is going to continue to be a concern because of the use, because they're becoming more ubiquitous in our daily lives. How many young people do you know are using a frontier model, right? What is the likelihood that frontier models are going to reface our education system, right? What do you need a teacher for when you have a frontier model that knows more information about education than your average teacher does?
Mm-hmm.
So again, I don't want to over prescribe, right, or over specify, but at the frontier level of product development, there are considerations for privacy, security, and regulatory scrutiny. And so the industry I've worked in has not always been in a regulatory consistent and regulatory satisfied space. It was only last year, 2025, with the Clarity Act and the the Genius Act and the upcoming Clarity Act, that we're going to have even more regulatory clarity around AI and around fintech and how we can automate more business workflow broadly. But I'm happy to be a front runner of regulation. I don't prescribe unregulated products, but I do seek to understand them and the value drivers they bring, because at the end of the day, regulation changes.
And regulation, this is under the like a smart contract would be one way that you could be able to monitor, and that's on the blockchain, correct?
I would just say broadly reporting requirements, right? If you're doing a financial transaction, there is a reporting requirement for that transaction. And you may choose to use decentralized rails for your transactions, but those decentralized rails are currently meeting those reporting requirements. So if you choose to build your own rails, you just need to be aware of what those reporting requirements are.
How do you keep track of all of this? Like where all of the information as you're building out? Is it a in-house type of environment that you're working in?
A team of many engineers, thanks to the micropay team. But broadly, I have operated under a build, measure, learn, share framework, and so I was very early to decentralize governance. There was a project almost 10 years ago called CityDAO. And CityDAO was a decentralized governance that bought, as a group, a collective piece of land. And they structured the governance of that land from crypto wallet holders. And so over the last 10 years, there's been many experiments of what decentralized governance looks like. And that's not stopping. It's going to continue growing with time. So as intelligence improves exponentially, the security and capability tools in order to protect your information property and have privacy have to scale at the same time as the intelligence. And so I find myself at the crossroads or the intersection of the intelligence and the information property and security management.
Wow. Your community, yeah, I know. It's like your community of people that you have surrounded yourself with. And you said the engineers at Micropay, you've mentioned BIM heroes, Accumulate. Like that's a lot of relationships that you're managing successfully to be in the place that you're in now.
Well, there were not many construction experts in blockchain groups. That's for sure.
Okay. Well, as we wrap up, I want to give those shout outs that I said. So we have Benoit here, Robert. How do you know? I know Benoit, and you've mentioned him before. How do you know Robert Giddens? He says the ethos of the ethos.
Yeah, Robert is the U.S. ambassador lead for BIM Heroes DAO. BIM Heroes DAO is a decentralized organization, Tennessee-based, of a network of over, I think, 3,000 global architecture, engineering, and construction experts, practicing business in over 190 countries currently. So when I say building information management, I'm not talking about just how we do things in the United States. We do seem to think we lead the whole world in everything and how smart we are. But believe it or not, there are people outside the US who also have data sovereignty, and they do things a little differently. And in a world where USDC and EuroDC both exist, this gives us a unique opportunity to transact with those two currencies in automated systems.
And how about Ralph? How do you know Ralph? What was he doing?
Ralph was the original chairman of BIM Hero DAO. He's a well-accomplished architect from Ireland, and he's now the acting secretary of the BIM Hero DAO community, Tennessee-based, and Larry Bridgesmith is the current chairman.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, thanks for coming out today. Thank you for our team that has supported us. We've got Chinny Marie Quintano, Annalie DeRiquito. We've got our MMM girls. Well, Jonathan, as we wrap this up, I want to hear, like, what are you looking for? How can I help you? How can the Market Me More team be able to market you more? And how can Top Voices support you?
Well, first of all, I want to start out with a shout out. Your team is amazing. I've never been invited to an opportunity to produce content to the execution and quality level of your team. So I would highly encourage any business owner to consider Market Me More as a service provider, as they absolutely add value. Second of all, I would say my team is looking to release a new open source product specifically around construction management, but I think it will apply to all business owners and all homeowners, right? So it's a very broad and general use tool. I'm hoping that release is going to happen tomorrow. I'm also submitting my project team for consideration for Coinbase right now. I've had the opportunity to work with them for projects in the past, and we're going really hard with this one. We really think that the way technology is changing and how we have harnessed models is unique in the marketplace as it exists today. And so I'm happy to get more content out around that. And then I have a new newsletter coming out talking about more of the on-site project work we're doing. So physically at the construction projects and in the real world instances and use case of our products. And then lastly, I would say just from the many contacts that I've had reach out to me from the Top Voices Unite community, the Emerging Voices Unite community, and the Market Me More broader ecosystem. I've had so many people reach out to me. So I would say anyone new to the community, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And I'd be more than happy to schedule, 10, 15 minutes to do a meet and greet, understand how they have found their way to these communities and how I can assist them in their journey through these communities.
Awesome.
With the winner.
It was fantastic. That was the Pathways Foundation was there. There was the Level Up Village, Learn Fresh, and I'm missing one. The Pathways Foundation, Learn Fresh, Level Up Village. Oh, Teach for America. That's what it was.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
All
All
right, that was great.
awesome teams, all world-class teams.
Yeah, it was a great experience. Well, for those of you that came, we are so glad. Whether or not you commented, maybe you're watching this on replay, let us know in the comments if you'd like to join us for a future event where we're teaching about founders, the insights that they have with the experiences that they've gained, how we can be able to work together to collaborate, and together we are stronger. My name is Nikki Estes. We are here with Jonathon Chambless.
Bless the Cham. Bless the Cham.
I learned it in the wrong way. I just memorized it. Anyways, I didn't memorize it well. Bless the Cham. Chambless. Jonathon Chambless and Nikki Estes here. We are so glad you joined us, and we look forward to seeing you in the future, learning about how we amplify voices through live streams.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, as always, for the opportunity. Vanity is a responsibility. Amen.
Visibility is a responsibility. All right. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye, guys.